believing everything written, liking everything that simply caught your interest, reposting without considering who the author is and what are his intentions. Recognize yourself? No? I don't believe it. And I'll prove it to you right now. Here is Stop Fake.
Watch this.
American journalist Seymour Hersh spread disinformation claiming that Ukraine was supposedly exporting illegal goods to Europe through the grain corridor. According to him, or rather some mystical American officials, Ukrainians were transporting drugs and oil from Russia to Europe. There is no evidence from this anonymous source to support the claim that Ukraine was transporting illegal goods during the grain deal. This tasteless pie with fake news filling was baked by the Russian mass media. The Kremlin consistently pushes the idea that Ukraine supposedly used the grain corridor for its own purposes. They claim that even the food aid didn't reach African countries that genuinely needed it. This is a convenient way for them to justify the constant shelling from the Black Sea.
It was intended to be a noble cause, a good cause. It turned out that most of the grain went to Europe. I mean Ukrainian grain.
Grain went to Europe and drugs to Russian leadership. Over nearly a year of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, Ukraine has exported over 33 million tons of grain to 45 countries. More than a half of food goes to Africa and Asia. Part of the grain purchased by European countries is sent to Africa and Asia as a humanitarian re-exports. Ships chartered by the World Food Programme delivered 725,000 tons of grain to support humanitarian operations in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen. Even amidst the war, Ukraine remains the largest supplier of wheat to the World Food Programme in 2022, providing over a half of the organization's global wheat purchases.
Russia continues weaponizing food by terminating agreements. Russia is single-handedly blocking one of the crucial main export routes from Ukraine of grains for human consumption, and is solely responsible for disruptions of grain deliveries worldwide and fueling food price inflation globally. The EU urges Russia to reconsider its decision and immediately resume implementation of the Black Sea Grain Initiative.
Watch this.
Let's switch from the global problems to the internal ones. The German publication Bild released an article titled "Huge Problem in the Ukrainian Army." To convey the scale of these issues to the reader, the author caps-locked the headline. The article narrated that failure of the counteroffensive, the advancement of Russian forces akin to tanks, and portrayed Ukrainian soldiers drawing amidst these aforementioned significant problems. It was a brief summary of an article where a journalist engaged with 5 military personnel and subsequently published an extensive conclusion. Additionally, it claimed that while the comment praised tanks like Leopard, Challenger and Abrams, the military lacked armored personal carriers and off-road vehicles, leading troops to use aging Niva vehicles. The narrative about issues in the Ukrainian army is actively promoted by Russian propaganda. Foreign journalists, after hearing just a few opinions, depict them as a representative of the entire Ukrainian armed forces. Interestingly, even Russian propagandists find such manipulation surprising. Specifically, propagandist Sheinin expressed doubts that the opinions of 5 military personnel accurately represents a widespread crisis throughout the entire army.
And no, I don't argue at all with the fact that things are so bad for them. I think there are even worse things out there. But is this a reason to expand this picture to the armed forces of Ukraine as a whole? Not sure.
And the cherry on the top of the propagandistic cake about the problems within the Ukrainian army. An incredible number of casualties. The Kremlin spares no effort in this regard. Here is an example of a classic viral misinformation campaign, supposedly a storyline from Ukrainian television, where viewers notice a ticker reporting over 1 million deaths of Ukrainian soldiers.
Iran, come here.
What do you want?
Look at what they say. I'm trying to snap it.
What is there?
More than 1 million of our people died. Come here, look.
Oh, God.
This fake news has been debunked by everyone, both by the Center of the Countering Disinformation and the television broadcaster themselves. Experts pointed out clear signs of hackers' interference with the television broadcast. In other words, this ticker was inserted into the actual broadcast of the National Telemarathon, which airs on the several channels of Ukrainian television.
Watch this.
And now I propose to analyze one of the top fakes. The British journalist Peter Hitchens, in an article for the Daily Mail, wrote that the war in Ukraine brought nothing but harm to Ukrainians. According to him, Ukraine was used as a pawn in someone else's dispute. He claims that this was all orchestrated in Washington, where, according to the author, an even more insane invasion into Iraq was being prepared. One could have taken Peter's words at face value if it weren't for the fact that he frequently published materials that favor Russian propaganda. The Western evil empire is fighting the Russian army through the hands of Ukrainians. This fake mantra is repeatedly echoed by the leadership of the aggressor state and Kremlin propagandists.
In 1942, the Nazi criminal Reichskommissar E. Koch wrote the following in an address to the imperial press leaders. Ukraine is for us only an object of exploitation. It must pay for the war, and the population must, to a certain extent, be used as a second-class people in solving military problems, even if you need to catch it with a lasso. Today, the historical West, led by the United States, adheres to an essentially similar line, ready to restrain Russia until the last Ukrainian.
These statements are outright lies. Russia invaded Ukraine. The Russian army is fighting against Ukraine's defense forces. International partners are aiding Ukraine in resistance the occupiers. Just in 2022 alone, allies provided over 4,000 units of armored vehicles, artillery installations, aircraft, and other weaponry to the armed forces of Ukraine, as calculated by Bloomberg. Every civilized country considers it as a moral duty to support Ukraine in its fight against Russia, whose aggression could rapidly escalate.
So, personally for me, it means that the Czech Republic belongs to those civilized countries, and due to our historical experience, we have a moral duty to help Ukraine. Because in Ukraine, they are not only fighting for Ukraine, they are fighting for all of us, including the Czech Republic.
Within the coalition of evil, there is no chance. President Joe Biden stated that democracy is preparing a response to autocracy. He compared Putin to Hamas militants and assured that the United States will stand against evil until the end.
Both Putin and Hamas are fighting to wipe a neighboring democracy off the map, and both Putin and Hamas hope to collapse broader regional stability and integration and take advantage of the ensuing disorder. America cannot and will not let that happen, for our own national security interests and for the good of the entire world.
Watch this.
Now let's whip up a salad using a propagandist recipe. Grab a manipulative cucumber, a deceitful tomato, add some twisted facts cabbage, and absurd pepper. Then mix it all up nicely right before broadcasting. And voila! The Bulgarian journalist Rumen Petkov claims that the Americans called Ukraine for peace talk with Russia. He shared this opinion in his broadcast on Bulgarian television. On his own website, pogled.info, he writes that the West is in a hurry to conclude a truce in Ukraine, even at the cost of a land corridor to Crimea, as well as the wealthy Donbas. No matter how hard I tried, the propaganda puzzles did not come together for me at all. Possible peace talks with Russia and what Ukraine will have to give up are not publicly discussed between the United States and Europe, writes NBC News. But Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky himself refutes any talk of pressure on the Ukrainian authorities to start peace talks.
Everyone knows my attitude coincides with the attitude of Ukrainian society. No one is pressuring us. Neither the leaders of the EU, nor the United States, nor our other partners are asking us to sit down to talk with Russia and give it something. This will not happen.
In turn, the German government and the US State Department denied the information that Washington and Berlin were pushing Ukraine towards peace talks with Russian Federation.
Any negotiations, Alex, are up to Ukraine. And as we have said a number of times before, nothing should happen about Ukraine without Ukraine. We are not aware of any conversations with Ukraine about negotiations outside of the peace formula structure that you've already seen a number of engagements take place on. But it continues to be incredibly clear, Alex, that the Kremlin has no interest in negotiating or ending this war, and we are committed to supporting our Ukrainian partners.
Watch this.
Once again, I remind you, don't believe in fakes. Spread only verified information or episodes from our program. It was Stop Fake. See you next time.